Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to be drawing with these lovely Posca pens on some black paper. This is actually something I've been wanting to do for a while now. Since I got my Posca pens, I've been wanting to see how they react on black paper. And yeah, I think it's going to be pretty fun. So let's dive into it. So this is the paper that I'm going to be using today with these Posca pens, and it is basically just Winsor and Newton sort of black sugar paper. It is 140 GSM, and yeah, it's just like your sort of normal black sketchbook. The paper isn't really that thick or anything. Now to start off, I'm actually doing a bit of a sketch with a graphite pencil, and that's because I didn't really feel into sort of just diving in with the pens. I kind of just wanted to sketch up and test something out to make a nice little illustration. Now, as you can see, I have a tiger skull here as a reference, and that's because I wanted to draw a dragon skull, but I'm also going to be using a tiger skull as reference. The reason being is that I wanted to draw a dragon skull and make it look like it's an actual skull of a carnivore, a predator type animal, and see if I can get something that looks like it could be a natural skull, if that makes any sense. I basically took this skull of this tiger and I decided to use it as a base for what I'm going to be adding other details over the top to make it a little bit more dragon-like. Now we're diving in with these Posca pens, and first off you can see that these pens are being quite a bit leaky at the moment. I don't know why, but I think maybe because I've had these pens sitting here for a little while without using them, and then I did shake them up quite a bit to get the paint mixed in there, so who knows, maybe there was some pressure thing. But throughout this illustration, these pens, every time I put a bit of pressure onto the paper, they just sort of blobbed out paint everywhere. But it wasn't too unmanageable. I still had some tissues aside here which I could sort of mop up any excess paint. And I just went in adding the first layer of color onto this illustration. Now this color that I'm using today is ivory, which seems like a perfect color for bone, I'm guessing. And first off, you can see that it is still showing a bit of that black color through. I actually had to go in and add a couple layers to this to make it nice and opaque. I'm not sure if that's because I didn't shake the pens up enough. I feel like I did though. I did give them quite a bit of a good shake. But that's okay because in the second coat, it looked really nice and solid. Now with this first layer, I am just adding in a block color, so I'm trying to make sure that I preserve the details that I put down in the sketch. As you can see, I've left areas where later I'm going to be coming in with perhaps shadows or a little bit of line art detailing. Now as far as first impressions go, this paper probably wasn't the best choice for me to put a wet media on. It isn't the thickest of paper, and I felt like with any sort of liquid added over the top, it did buckle a little bit here and there, but I sort of just was very careful with these pens and made sure I didn't color in huge areas at the same time so that I could give each area a sort of a chance to dry so that I didn't have this paper really wet. I also had to be really careful with these nibs too, because the nibs on these Posca pens are quite abrasive, and I feel like if I go over the same area too many times, it will sort of eat up the paper. So I kind of just went over each area in sort of careful lines, and then I would let that dry and go over the top if I needed to fix any parts. Next up, I'm adding in some shadows here and there, trying to deepen the sort of color palette and add a little bit of shape to this creature because it is quite flat at the moment, and I'm using that with my beige Posca pen. It's probably not the best shadow color for this sort of design. However, I do have quite a lot of Posca pens, but I am still a bit limited in each sort of tone because with these pens you can't really layer things over the top and add shadows. So I had to sort of, compensate with adding browns instead of, darker sort of grayish browny colors. But overall, I still think that the color palette worked quite well, and the sort of simplicity of the design that I'm drawing today did really work in my favor, because I was able to use colors that I probably wouldn't have if I was drawing something crazily detailed, and it still works and looks good. Now that we have a basis for what we're going to be working with today, I'm going to go over the top and add a bunch of details here and there, because I felt like just a plain dragon skull was a little bit boring, and I had planned to add a few more details, including some cracks over this skull, as well as some plants, which I'm going to be doing later on. Now, funnily enough, this design was actually slightly inspired by another artist here on YouTube. She is a good friend of mine, and her name is Darkest Raven Designs, and she has drawn a few skulls in her time. She even drew a skull as part of a collab that we did recently. But overall, her art is awesome, and she actually inspired me today to draw a skull with some plants going through it. So yeah, definitely go check her out. I'm going to be adding a link in the description to her channel, and yeah. So back to the art now. I am going over and adding some highlights and stuff here and there, but I felt like it still needed a little bit more detail on the actual skull before I go in and add plants all over this skull. And to do that, I actually went in with some white here, and I'm just adding a little bit of highlights here and there just to push certain details and just give it a little bit more shape. The whole thing still felt a little bit too mid-tone for me, and I really wanted to sort of push those highlights since we're working with such a dark background. This also helped to add a little bit more shape to this skull. As you can see, it still looks a little bit flat, and I'm trying to make it look like it is a bit 3D, and I think that white helped. After this, it is time to add some line art onto this creature. As you can see, it is mostly just flat colors here and there, and with my Posca pens, I do have quite a bit of fun adding line art over the top of already colored artwork. I can't really do that with other artworks because I feel like line art is a really good sort of basis to start an illustration on. However, with my Posca pens, since they are an opaque medium, I feel like you can't really add line art and then color over the top, because you're basically just going to be covering up that line art anyways, since you are pretty much working with paint. But yeah, I took my thinnest Posca pen possible, and I went over and added some lines here and there, and I also felt like I still wanted to push those shadows quite a bit, because I don't know, I just wasn't really happy with the shadows, and I wanted to deepen them a bit, and I didn't want to just use pure black on those shadows. So I actually went in with my thin Posca pen and I added some cross hatching, which I really do love because it adds a little bit of grittiness to this artwork, a little bit of texture, and obviously shading, and it helps just add some interesting details in there which I couldn't get before. That cross hatching was great too, because it helped me get some sort of variances in shading which I couldn't do with block color. As you can see, some areas have just one layer of cross hatching, and then some areas have like 2 layers where it's actually crossing over in a different direction. And I found it really fun to just go over the top of this drawing and add layers upon layers of details and just see what comes of it. Now it's time to add some plants to this. As I said earlier, I'm planning to add plants all over this skull, which I really love the look of. I love seeing art where there's like, you know, skulls or bones and then there's like plants growing through it. I feel like it is a really interesting sort of concept where you have obviously a skull which makes you think of death, and then you have plants which make you think of life, and I just really love that sort of feeling that it gives. It's like the circle of life kind of thing. But But yeah, with these plants, I didn't want to go too crazy with the details because I want the skull to be the main focus of this illustration. So I just went in with some rough shapes, and with the more dark bluey sort of leaves, I had them nice and sort of nice, you know, your normal round leaf shape. And then with the lighter colors, I went in and added some like little ferny sort of shapes. And after this, I went in with a slightly thinner Posca pen and added some little plants coming out of the eyes and the nose. I did want to add a little extra pop of color in there, so I added some pink flowers on the ends of those. And I actually really like the pink because it really does sort of just add a nice little hint of color here and there, but it still works well with the colors of the illustration because we do have that slightly pinkish beige in the shadows of the skull. After this, I went over and I just added a little bit of shading here and there with a black and also a white Posca pen, and I just did that sort of cross-hatching sort of shading style just to sort of incorporate it into the plants as well so that they fit into the illustration. And overall, I really like it. I think this illustration was really fun and just something a little bit different than I usually do, but still has that same themes that I like to play with, like dragons and stuff. So here is the final results of this illustration, and I just love it. I think it looks really nice. I did have to go in later and just sort of snip the outsides of the paper just so that it was framed nicer, and yeah, it was really fun to make. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're new here, please check out my other videos. I have a lot of drawing, sort of art style videos that I really love to make. And I would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you can get notified of when I'm going to be uploading. So I hope you all have a lovely day, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye everyone!